I went home that night, picked up a copy of the Wealthy Barber book, read it cover to cover like 3 times, opened my first like mutual fund account, $100 a month that I was able to save, put it into a mutual fund at the age of 15. Like what 15-year-old has a mutual fund? Like, so anyway, that kind of set, I think, like the wheels in motion for me for what happened thereafter.
Hey guys, welcome to the How I Got Here podcast. I'm your host, Travis Waters, and I designed this podcast to share stories that are worth telling, whether it's about somebody going from zero to hero, hero to zero, or simply something in between. On today's episode, we talked to my friend Jesse of Betting Startups Podcast and now Betting Startups Capital, talk about how he went from essentially selling lotto tickets to taking the sports betting world by storm. Let's go ahead and hop into our talk with him now. Enjoy. Hey guys, welcome to the How I Got Here podcast. On this episode, we are joined by my good friend Jesse, who is on the other side of the spectrum for this episode. You may have seen this man all over the place with his own Betting Startups podcast. We got him on the guest spot here. Jesse, for those who may not know you by name or by face yet, which I feel like is practically impossible at this point, let's do a quick high-level overview of what you're up to here in 2026.
I know you always ask this question saying in 10 seconds or less. I don't know how well people do with that, so I'll give my best 10-second shot here, Travis. I focus most of my time now on betting startups. Betting startups sits at the intersection of trade media, technology, and more recently, capital. Really, we position ourselves as the connective tissue of the early stage ecosystem within real money gaming.
I think that
How's
was
that?
about 7.5, so that's pretty good. That's pretty
Okay, take
solid.
the under. All right.
So the question we always like starting off with is for you to tap into your earliest memory bank, the very first thing that you can remember having interest in or wanting to be when you grew up, and what was that, and kind of what age range were you in?
I know a lot of the cliche answers with people on the podcast say things like, when I was younger, and particularly for young men, you want to be a professional athlete. I never really aspired for that, so I don't really have a cliche answer. And to be honest, I never really had a clear sense when I was younger what I wanted to be when I grew up. That said, I kind of had a feeling and a thought that this idea of entrepreneurship was interesting. Of course, I didn't know what that word was or what it meant, but my version of that when I was young, I must have been like 8 years old or thereabouts. My mom at the time, she decided to start a home-based business, and this is like 1990, might have been like 1989. So we're going back a hot minute here. But essentially, she launched like a boutique like homemade beeswax, handmade beeswax candles. She got a line on a distributor of this like very nice beeswax, very tough to get back then. And she got the raw materials and she basically got into the candle making business and from home in a little like craft room made these things by hand. Beautiful candles, smell great, look great, burn very well. And what she would do is she would take these to local craft fairs, right? So, Christmas time or around the holidays at the local community center or whatever. You go there and, selling your crafts. We would get a table there and selling our candles. And she would bring myself and my brother to these things, mostly because she didn't have people to like look after us while she was at the craft show. So she's like, oh, I guess I'll bring my kids with me. So I would stand there behind her at the table, while she would sell candles to old ladies at the craft fair. And I'm like, this is all very interesting and kind of watching the transactions happen. And, she would nicely package up the candles, hand them across. They would hand over some cash. There was no square readers to tap back then. It was all cash transactions. She would put the cash into a little like wooden box we had. And it was this kind of like little like family business we had. It was never really to make money. It was a hobby project for her. Yeah, it brought in a few dollars to kind of help, pay for our league entry fees for soccer and baseball growing up. But that did give me a bit of a window into, this idea of like starting your own business. And then more interestingly for me, and I think part of my development, she's like, well, wait a minute. Why do I have these kids kind of standing behind me at this table at the craft show? When people come up to the table, they actually want to like ask the kids what's going on here. So she would put me front and center talking to the customers. And very quickly she learned that the customers were more interested in talking to me as this 8-year-old kid and having me sort of explain the product and the production process and like the origins of the beeswax. And she's like, I don't need to be here at all. So, she'd go for a cigarette and I'd be kind of there running the station, and selling candles. And it kind of gave me, the experience talking to people from a customer service perspective, being able to represent a product, developing my own confidence, just speaking and, as a kid, being able to like, talk to adults. And really, like for me, I didn't have a clear vision like what I wanted to do with that, but I was just like, this is really cool. I don't really know what I want to be when I grow up, but this idea of like doing your own thing and kind of just figuring it all out along the way was very interesting to me. So that was, I guess, the earliest possible thoughts I had insofar as like which direction my career might take me.
So one of the things I like to highlight the most when they occur in all of these episodes that I do on this high podcast is the my favorite part is the parallels that I find from someone else's path to the path that I had. And this is the earliest that I've kind of ever had that parallel is the first thing you pretty much said, where I do think that my mom, like at the age of 1, she created her own daycare that ran out of our house. And so essentially my house was always living slash business. And I think her running her own daycare did have some sort of influence on the entrepreneurial side of where I eventually wound up. So it's so interesting that I don't know. I love that part about having these talks. So 8 years old, you're essentially the number one seller of beeswax candles of 8-year-olds in the world at this point. So not interested in the entrepreneurial side of that. Not sure what career journeys you're having. So now that you're getting into age 9, age 10, middle school, early high school, does that shift at all? Do you get some more interest in other things, or does it become pretty much no concrete concept of future interest or future goals for a career at that point?
Yeah, so if we fast forward the timeline to high school, still no really clear sense of like what I wanted to be when I grew up, quote unquote. But a couple like I don't say serendipitous things happened, but one like I can now look back on as being a bit of a turning point insofar as how my thinking evolved and developed at that time. And as I was trying to map out, and when you're in high school, you get these people that call themselves career counselors who we don't need to debate their qualifications to be in that role, but that aside, these people that are sat in front of you to sort of help you map out what you want to do with your life, like what a big question, right? Who the hell's supposed to know at not only any age, but like that age in particular? Like, what do I know? But there was this like very formative moment for me in must have been like grade 9 or 10. And at least where I live here in the province of British Columbia, there's this like sort of government mandated curriculum around that time they call career and personal planning. The acronym is CAP. And basically, it's just like over the course of a semester, it's a series of like 2-week modules. It's where they slot in things like sex ed, but also like home ec. Just they give you like exposure over 2-week modules, so a bunch of different stuff. One of the 2-week modules, I don't really know what the module was, and it was like one of those scenarios where it was like the gym teach. You know how they have like the gym teacher, like who obviously is like a big jock and he's wearing his gym shorts all the time, and from time to time he has to like show up in a classroom and like teach a class that he's underqualified to teach. Anyway, one of the modules was the gym teacher running it. He obviously had no like lesson plan or real curriculum. So he brought in what I'd later learned was the dad of one of the girls in my class. And the dad worked as an investment advisor at a firm here in Canada called Investors Group. By the way, like I wouldn't trust them with a dollar of my money, but that aside, they're a very like prestigious, well-known, like very large brand and ostensibly successful at what they do. But he came in to teach this class of very bored, uninterested, like grade 9 kids. And I had this idea that like business was interesting. I didn't really know much about what that meant, but there was this like all of a sudden this like dude in a suit and a tie at the front of my class, and I'd never seen one of those guys before. I'm like, oh, listen what this guy has to say. And he held up his book called The Wealthy Barber, and it was written by a Canadian. I don't know if like the pros of The Wealthy Barber, like the main takeaways, like sort of extended beyond the shores of Canada. But the core premise of The Wealthy Barber, like the entirety of the books, TLDR, is like compounding interest, right? And the idea of like, over a long enough time horizon, if you do small things, they compound over time. And this guy basically broke down this concept of compound interest. And, he's like, if you invest $100 a month, at the age of whatever you were, 13, 14, over a long enough time horizon, when you get to retirement, here's what it'll be worth. I'm like, holy shit, like this is really cool. Like all of a sudden, like a practical application of math. And I'm like, money, like it was very interesting. It really opened my eyes to this idea of compounding. And like, that has stuck with me up until current day. And a lot of what I do now, I still like root in this premise of like compounding effects and like how can you lean into compounding both from like not only just like an interest perspective, but in life, how can you stack things up and have them compound over time? So that for me was a bit of an inflection point. And again, to your question about like, well, where do I take myself in my life? I'm like, okay, like, business is interesting to me. I got a bit of a window into that through my candle dealing days. Now I'm sort of understanding some of these like more like fundamental like business concepts and financial concepts and this idea of like, financial independence and like all of this. It was really starting to circulate in my brain. So all I really had like as a teenager, Travis, was like this sense of like I think business is for me. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how it's going to manifest, but the more traditional paths that they tried to push you down at that time and at that age weren't really for me. I wasn't that interested in science. Like I was pretty good at math, but like, science, like the arts, like it wasn't really that interesting to me. I'm like, this business thing is compelling, and there's a lot under the surface of this iceberg that I think I need to learn more about. So that I think was this like very like innocuous moment that sort of set the trajectory for me. I went home that night, picked up a copy of the Wealthy Barber book, read it cover to cover like 3 times, opened my first like mutual fund account, $100 a month that I was able to save, put it into a mutual fund at the age of 15. Like what 15-year-old has a mutual fund? Like, so anyway, I kind of set, I think, like the wheels in motion for me for what happened thereafter.
I all the biggest takeaway I have from all of that is the Canadian education system far outpaces the one that I had. I was like, I don't think we had anything career wise or like I'm floored that not only did you have that that was presented to you, but you already had the kind of know with all or mental capacity to focus on, oh, this is, even though this is high level future adult stuff, I can start looking at this now and working on this now. That's, man, you definitely got a head start there, and props to the BC education system.
Well, like
Um,
I say, I mean, I don't want to give them too much credit. It was like this gym teacher who was put in the classroom. He was like, I don't know what to like occupy these kids with for an hour. I'll get one of the dads and one of the kids to come in and talk about what he does
yeah.
for work. Like that, I think that was the extent of it. It wasn't by design, so let's not give them too much credit here.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough, fair enough. So this was you said it was what, early high school, age 13 is, or no, age 15 you said you opened the mutual fund, is that right?
That's right.
And so now we're what, 2, 3 years away from graduation. While you're reading this book, you have this fascination. You're actually taking action on these compound interest concepts in high school. Are you doing anything extracurricular activities? Whether it's, I know you say you don't really care about not sports, but arts and stuff like that, and sciences, but sports. Is there anything happening during these final years of high school that maybe shifting you somewhere outside of entrepreneurship, or was every decision made kind of going along that path?
From that point on, things were a little bit more intentional as far as decision making goes. And again, like, grade 10 or whenever that moment was, like you're starting to think at that point about what happens in 2 to 3 years when I leave this place. And, if you have some sense of where you want to be after you leave, you got to start laying the groundwork in those 2 or 3 years to get there, right? If you want to go into whatever, you want to get a science degree, you got to start taking the prerequisites to get into a college that you can get your degree in science in. So I had to start making decisions around like elective classes to take that would put me on a path towards getting into a business school after graduation. So it set a bit of a trajectory that way. For the rest of like high school more broadly, I was a bit of a chameleon. So like on the weekends, I'd be like a ragtag, like at my skateboard. I'd be with my friends down at the skate park, like hanging out, doing like teenager things at the skate park. A little bit of sports in there still. Like I didn't fully give up on sports, but like knew I wasn't going to become a professional athlete. It was just something for fun, and again, just a bit of an extracurricular. Randomly, I don't think I've ever like shared much of this publicly, but randomly in grade 12, a good friend of mine, he's like, Jesse, he's like, I'm gonna run for student council president. And I'm like, oh, like, why? And like, you can be one of those like dorky, like, rah rah types, and like that school spirit, like, was not my vibe. But he's like, what if you joined me and became co-presidents of the student council? And I'm like, why? So he kind of talked me through it. I'm like, not really my bag, not really like my area of interest, but also like kind of interesting to think about being the president of a student council in a school of 1,800 people and like what comes with that and like what opportunities are there to like, I didn't have like quite the lucidity of like thinking it so far as like developing one's leadership, but I'm like, this is kind of a cool opportunity. Like I wasn't on the student council before grade 12. Why don't I just finish my last year of high school as like co-president of the student council of a school of 1,800 people? So I did that. And that was really interesting to kind of start to understand like, how systems and structures work. You have this sort of body of students that represent the student council. They have, a relationship with the school and the administrators, and then you try to work together and just like the sort of collaborative effort. Like that part was pretty cool for me to just sort of the team building side and a bit more of an intangible that again, lessons learned and experience gained really did sort of help me later on in university in terms of just like again collaborating in team-based projects in university, and of course mostly more importantly thereafter in like the real world when you need to work with people, you need to get along with people, you need to problem solve with people, you need to get through challenging situations together with people. That gave me pretty good exposure to that and in a fairly high stakes environment. I mean, as high stakes things go when you're in grade 12, I mean that was pretty high stakes. We had an operating budget. I think every student in the school had to pay like a $10 like student fee at the start of the year. So we had a budget of like whatever, like 15, 18, $20,000, which in like grade 12 was like a ton of money. And we're like, how do we allocate this? How do we manage a budget? Like, how do we make spending decisions? So it was like a pretty interesting and informative experience, but like I don't identify with that as being a formative part of my sort of high school years, albeit, yeah, I guess in retrospect, being the co-president of the student body of a school of almost 2,000 people was pretty formative. So I was doing that. Well, again, like being a goofball on the weekends at the skate park with my friends and trying to figure out what I want to do for university and what I want to be when I grow up. But, man, I was just trying to, like everybody, just trying to sort of get through it and figure things out and try not to like drop in, fall into too many traps or hazards along the way that would really set me back. And luckily I didn't and got through it all. And yeah, onwards from high school.
Man, I'm still I'm still impressed by this entire journey so far. Like, what the heck are we doing here in the US? So a one-off skate park question. Now, is this the skate park that's got like the rails and the half pipes and stuff like that?
So the park we had in our town, which at the time there was just one, there's a few more now. But the one we had at the time was a bowl, which is, like almost like a swimming pool type
Yeah.
concept. It's the hole in the ground. Which is to say, when we talk about skateboarding, there's really like two types of skateboarding. There's street skating, and then there's vert, which is ramps. This park was geared more towards the vert skating. People that like skating on ramps. There wasn't a lot of like rails and things like that. It's probably for the best because I did manage to hurt myself pretty badly on a few occasions. So like the less hazards there were for me, here in my 40s, I'm like, wow, I really wish I probably didn't skate quite as hard as I did because I'm really starting to feel it now in all my joints. But yeah, the skate bowl was pretty cool. It was pretty badass, and man, there was some really good skaters. I mean, much like a lot of small towns, there's just not a lot else to do. And when you're a teenage kid, you hang out at the skate park, and like it produced a lot of like really high level skaters, a few that went on to become pros. So, kind of cool to think about those days. But yeah, definitely wasn't in the top echelon of skaters. I was just trying not to fall off my board most days.
All right. So I was going to ask you like how often did you get hurt, but you kind of already answered that question. I feel
Yeah,
like I
I was the one in the friend group that I was always falling and
yeah.
getting like pretty debilitating injuries.
You're the one that we're always calling the ambulance for. Oh, he broke
Right.
another arm. There he goes. So I know when you said earlier that you kind of around this point are already thinking about business school. I'm assuming that played a part as well into you wanting to go the co-president route because not only does I know you weren't thinking in the future of, oh, this is going to develop leadership skills, but it might look good on paper when I'm applying these business schools.
Yes.
Now, was the idea for this business school, was it very vague and vast of just getting into business school, or did you actually have more of a exact focus on what you wanted to do with your furthering education?
Very vague is like the shortest possible answer. It was still a vague notion. I'm like, okay, I think business is like the field in which it makes the most sense for me based on the first 18 years of my life. But like how I drill down from there, I have no idea, no concept of that. But yeah, it was pretty vague. And the university I got into, they had I don't say like a non-traditional business school at the time. It was a little bit exotic, but now it's pretty standard. They had like four different like tracks you could specialize in. One was entrepreneurship, which ironically I didn't go in. The second one was international business, which I did. A third one is like hospitality, which I doubt they even offer that anymore, and I forget what the fourth one is. So like international business, I literally picked that one for the sole reason being that if you were on that track, you had to do a mandatory semester abroad. I'm like, well, great. I'm going to punch my ticket to go spend 4 months somewhere else that I've never been before. Like, that was literally the only reason was to go abroad for 4 months. But yeah, there was no rhyme or reason to it, and I certainly had no clarity of like, what am I going to do, like quote unquote, in the business world on the other end of this 4-year journey here.
That I if I was in that same scenario, I probably would have chose that track as well. I've never I've had a lot of friends. I've never asked them this question before that have done studying abroad, and I'm curious. And this, I don't know if this is a dumb question or not, but I literally have zero experience with it. Is how much of that is any of that paid by the school, or is it all self funded?
At least in my sample size of one, it was self-funded. The school had reciprocal deals with other universities around the world, so they had sort of a network of like partner
Yeah.
universities that you could choose to go to, and of course, the partner universities would send their students to here to the University of Victoria. But you were on your own dime the whole way. I mean, it was just like paying for a semester as if you were at home. Unless you have a scholarship, which I didn't. You're on your own dime.
So we take the international option to go international during this time at this business university, this business school. Is the idea of what you want to turn this into getting more solidified, or is it still like through the actual entire secondary schooling part of your life, or is it still pretty like, hey, I'm not sure, I just know it's business, and I also like the fact that I'm going to be somewhere else for 4 months?
Again, like completely the latter. I had no idea through that 4 years until I picked up my degree, like what I was going to do with it. And then even once I picked up my degree, I'm like, I still don't know what I'm going to do. I went and got a job. Um, so no, there was like no intentionality, which is like, I don't know if a good thing or a bad thing. But again, I was kind of just going with the flow on it, gonna let it unfold organically. Not to like sound like a cliche like Instagram post, but like like trust the universe, like kind of approach to it. Like something I'm sure will like solidify and crystallize for me once I get out of university. But no, like it was me just like literally just trying to like get through that 4 years and not trying to like draw with, a lot of my friends got like the 4 year degree in 6 years. They kind of took their time. They had fun through school. It took them a little longer to finish it. My mindset was just like, what's the shortest path to getting in and out of this place? And, I can do it in 4 years. Great. So I had, to work my ass off to get through it. I had to fund my own way through it. So I was working 35 hours a week in a full-time job, making $7 an hour while going to school full time just to pay for school to get through it all. So like I was pretty focused on just getting through it. But like had to work my ass off to do it. Incidentally, the job I had to pay my way through it and to triangulate a little bit to part of the reason we're talking here today and the industry we're both in, that was that job that I had to pay my way through university was my first exposure to betting, which is kind of ironic, I guess, looking back on it now. But yeah, man, I had to pay my whole way through. I was just like nose to the grindstone, grinding, and got through it in 4 years like I wanted to do, and then still had no idea what I wanted to do once I was done.
So the first opportunity of this, I guess you can say, the gambling space, the sports betting space, iGaming space. How did that come about for you to work at that opportunity while to essentially get yourself through school?
Well, let me paint this picture for you, Travis. So again, here in British Columbia, the government, provincial government, has a monopoly on sports betting as well as every form of real money gaming, lotteries included. So the job that I had, I got it when I was 18 years old. It was my first real job. It was like in my tiny town of 3,000 people. They had one sort of general store. So I got a job at the general store in my local town. And at the general store, my job was very generalist. I had to do everything from like going in like the butcher's, going to like the butcher area and like clean the equipment after he does like a process, which was disgusting. I had to do, take the lettuce out in the morning, produce, trim the produce. Had to work the cash register and work the till. I had to sell cigarettes to all the local drunks, like all of it, right? Within that, one thing I also had to do was to operate the lottery machine at the cash register, right? So people came up like, oh, I want a lottery ticket for tonight. To be able to operate a lottery machine, one has to go through a mandatory 4 hour training put on by the BC Lottery Corporation on how retailers use the machine to understand the products, know what you're selling, et cetera, et cetera. So I go to this like mandatory 4 hour training. It was like, it was in like the seminar room at a local hotel. They had like the stale sandwiches out. It was all like all the cliche things, like boring as hell. I turn up to this thing because I have to. They're going through like the different lotteries, like all of it, and it's just like a snooze fest. And then eventually they get to this product that they talk about called sports action. And I'm like, sports action. I'm like 18 at this point. I'm like a teenage dude. Like I like sports. I follow sports. My bedroom's like littered with posters of like all my favorite baseball players and hockey players. And all of a sudden, they're talking about things like the point spread and the over under. And I'm like, what is this? And I'm also like leaning in and I'm like, wait a minute. So now I can like watch a game, but also like have this like new dynamic over top of it where there's a point spread and you have to beat the spread or you have to go over a total or under a total. Like, and then, for again, the BC Lottery Corporation's product is like at the time it was mandatory minimum three leg parlays, right? So there was like the math about like parlay math. And like, this is like fucking fascinating. I'm 18 years old. I'm in like I was hooked from not hooked. That's a bad word to use, but like I was captivated from that point in time. Literally the next day, I go back to work at the grocery store. One interesting note in all of this, Travis. I was 18, I think, when I took the training, and I could sell the tickets. But you have to be 19 to buy the tickets, right? So I'm not able to buy the own like sports betting tickets I'm selling. So of course, what I do naturally, I print out my own ticket. I put $2 into the cash register. I sell one to myself. I'm not supposed to, but I do it anyway. So that was like my first window into betting, and of course, I'm just like, this is great. Like added a new dynamic to the following my teams, and like gave me a sweat, like all of it. And I was like, that was the entry point for me. Very again by accident, not intentional. And then like as I got to university and like life started to go on, I got my first credit card my early 20s, and this is like the early 2000s at this point. A friend of mine's like, hey, I got this online betting account I use. I'm like tell me more about that. I just buy these tickets over the counter from BC Lottery. He's like, no. He's like, those are awful. He's like, go to this website. And it was Bowmans.com, which later got acquired by Bet365, and my account got migrated to Bet365. But like, in 2002, I opened my first Bowmans account, and then my first account with the World Sports Exchange, and a few others. And like, again, I don't want to say the word hooked, but like I was like in. I'm like from the customer side, I'm like these products are great. World Sports Exchange had this product called the Interactive, which now looks very close, very similar to these sport event contracts and prediction markets, but it was sort of like the original version of that, and it was super fascinating. And like through the early and mid 2000s, betting a ton on sports for better or for worse, just kind of like learning about it from the customer side. In that time, poker had its moment sort of as a cultural phenomenon in the Chris Moneymaker era. I got pretty swept up in that in my early and mid 20s. Spent a lot of my time that I probably should have been spending doing other things, with my laptop in MTTs and playing a lot of cards online. And really just like used those first 10 years of the 2000s, just like really like, you know, becoming like my own customer, I guess, if you will, on the betting side, and developed a lot of experience, good, the bad, and the ugly, everything in between, and loved it. And it was a really like enjoyable, sort of hobby for me. I never took it too seriously. Like I did understand that from a sports betting perspective and poker too. I mean, you could put in the work, you could learn the fundamentals, you could grind out an edge. I always personally just viewed it more as an entertainment thing for myself. I'm like, could I do this? Could I apply a lot of like, yeah, probably. Was it interesting enough for me to do that? No, it started to feel like work at that point and took a lot of like the fun out of it for me. But yeah, that was that, and like really like cut my teeth through that first job on like that was my foray into like the sports betting world and like the broader like real money gaming world. And I was in from that point on.
So I know you mentioned that when you were in the, even after getting your degree or while you're being handed your degree at this business school, you're still not 100% sure what you are doing with it. You were working at this store selling these lotto tickets and also betting slips. Now that you're post the 19 where you can, well, no, you said you could sell them at 18, but you can only buy them at 19. That's right. And so now you are caught up in the gambling ecosystem. How long are you working at this one store selling these tickets, like throughout the entirety of college, and then you stopped, or did you still or were you still working here after you graduated?
No, so I stopped working there at like the age of 20. I finished my last 2 years of university, not working at that job anymore. So got through university, finished that up, and then got a job. There's like, there wasn't a lot of good jobs, kind of where I live. I got a job as a business school, as a business student that has no idea what he wants to do with his life. Of course, I'm like, I gotta like get like a quote unquote business job. So I found a local business job, working at a foreign exchange, a currency exchange sort of company at its core. It's what you think about when you go to any tourist town, right? The counter with the currency, you exchange it. But this company had an online platform. They were trying to do, sort of foreign exchange brokering through the internet, which back in 2003 was a pretty novel concept. It wasn't really a thing. And like the word fintech did not exist yet, right? So like this is pretty early on. So I got a job in this office working the graveyard shift for $24,000 a year. That's what I signed coming out of university. Like I took any opportunity that came my way. So yeah, working from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. for basically minimum wage in what is effectively a call center. I'm like, yeah, I guess I'll do this for a little bit until I figure out what I really want to do. So I get into this place. We are basically signing up new accounts and fulfilling, some lightweight KYC and sort of like anti-terrorist financing sort of like requirements, and basically taking people that find us on the internet that have some amount of currency they need to exchange to another currency. And our whole positioning was that we will give you better than bank rates on this thing, right? There was just a smaller spread on the FX transaction than you would get through a retail experience. Again, like anything online, that's sort of the value prop, right? This is, you have pricing power there. So I got into this company working in graveyard shift in like a frontline customer service type role. Within 3 months, my boss pulls me into the office. He's like, Jesse, he's like, you're working alongside a pretty ragtag group of people here, as I'm sure you've observed. He's like, I need somebody to like manage these people. It can't be me. So he's like, I'm giving you a promotion. You're now the team lead. You got to go back out to the room now and tell the people that you work with that you're their boss now. Like, oh, like, okay, interesting. So very long story short, like pretty quickly, I got put on, I guess, this like management track within this company and ended up running, along with two other managers, ended up running this operation for 4 years out of university. I got out of the graveyard shift pretty quickly, ended up on the more like, something more closely resembling a day job. But we ended up running this like foreign exchange platform. We were doing like $10 billion a year in transactions through it. I was running a team of 40 people in a 24/6 environment. And we were moving some pretty serious volume for a ragtag crew of like 20 something and 30 something like kids from the rest of the company's perspective. We were kind of like the redheaded stepchildren and otherwise like very corporate finance environment. They kind of put us into this one office, left us alone. They're like, the numbers are phenomenal. So whatever you guys are doing in there, keep doing that. We're not going to micromanage you, but you all look like crap. You should probably take a shower. Like it was traditional, like early internet type vibe in there.
Right.
But look, yeah, I mean, that gave me sort of a window into like, the financial industry, and it was very fascinating. It definitely informed a lot of my thinking. It also inspired me in many ways because the guy that founded it, a local guy here, he started all from scratch. And I'm like, this is a very like fascinating entrepreneurial story. Obviously, I'm part of this company and I'm seeing the growth trajectory that it's on. This is all very inspiring. And I ended up leaving there to start my own startup. We can come back to that in a second. But incidentally, a few months after I left, that company sold to Western Union for $370 million in cash. And, sort of the few years before that sale were the years I was there. And on that growth trajectory, what I didn't realize at the time is like we were basically helping pump the valuation, which ultimately led to that transaction. And a lot of that growth came from sort of the team that I was running. So it was just like a wild experience to be a part of in my early 20s. Again, there was no like intentionality behind finding my way there, other than I just needed to like find a job to pay the rent. And in doing so, like just showed up with a good attitude, did the best I could, and got elevated pretty quickly and got a lot of responsibility, probably too soon, and learned a lot and like great managerial leadership experience there. Again, good, the bad, the ugly with management and leadership. But it was just like an insanely wild business to be a part of, and again, just like inspired my own thinking in terms of me wanting to go out on my own. And like I saw this Peter guy do it. I'm like, if he can do it, I can do it. Why not?
I'm guessing in the promotion of the managerial role that there were no stock options involved.
Sadly, not. I didn't know what those were at the time. I skipped that day, I guess, of school.
That's the
No,
one book you
no
didn't
upside
read.
for me. No upside for me other than a good reference on my resume for whatever job was next.
So before you got shifted and you left the graveyard hours, because I'm just thinking on you were kind of getting into the online poker and the online sports betting side of things. I'm like, that's a pretty solid shift because it's not really affecting you sweating the games and not being able to like watch them and stuff. So was that something that you were paying attention to with the hours that you had? So when they shifted you to, like you said, normal day job hours, did that lead to some sort of frustration? Like, ah, crap, I can't actually watch the games now.
Not so much watching the games, I will say, like when you're at a job in an office environment from, hours of approximately 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I mean, there's certain like expectations and like, you got to keep up appearances. When you're there from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. with a few other people that drew the short straw that are sitting there alongside you, things are a lot more relaxed. There's nobody looking over your shoulder. You have a lot more time to do things that are of interest to you and whatever you got to do to keep awake during those hours when the phone's not ringing. So I would actually prefer that shift for the purposes of, doing research on bets. And I'm not to say I was playing poker while I was at work, 'cause I wasn't. That had pretty good firewalls there, and then there was no such thing as like an iPhone at that time, so that wasn't an option. But I'm sure if it was, I would. But no, like I actually preferred the graveyard shift for the purposes of like kind of like scratching the itch on the betting and gaming side. During the daytime, the day job, yeah, in theory I could watch the games in the evening, but like I had no time to do the research during the day. I had to do my job, and people were watching my screen. Like I couldn't do it. So ironically, I somewhat preferred the graveyard shift for that reason.
Yeah, I forgot the fact that you're on the west side with a different time zone because I was thinking when I asked that question, I was thinking more on my side, and you're like, "What do you mean you can watch the games with the regular shift?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's right, because the games start so much earlier for you over there." So it's interesting that you got the promotion. How satisfied were you in the role that you were in? To have you still like, okay, I got the promotion. This thing's going great. I'm managing these people to now. There's something that I have always wanted to do, which is create my own thing and let me now leave this to go there. What so I guess the question is, were you not enjoying the managing of the 40 people, or you just had that internal inspiration that was so strong, that glowing light that I need to build my own baby?
It was very much the latter. I had this like feeling in my belly, and like this, I would have been like whatever, 24, 25 at the time. I'm like, I'd gotten 4 years into this job, and and I didn't know it at the time, but because they were positioning towards this exit, when a company does that, all of a sudden things get very corporate. You're trying to get, you're when they're trying to sell a company, you're trying to present well to the potential buyers, right? And I didn't know that was happening at the time, but things like the vibe definitely shifted where it all of a sudden got like a lot more serious, a lot more corporate. And I'm like, I had like just a physical aversion to what was happening. I'm like, I can't be in this environment. This sucks, and I definitely can't do this for the next 40 years. If this is what business is like, I want nothing to do with it. And I just knew in that moment, I'm like, okay, the corporate career path is not going to be for me. I kind of had a feeling it wasn't, but like that validated it. I'm like, if this is like the game people are playing and like this is all fake and like I'm like, I want nothing to do with this. This is just not interesting to me. Yeah, there's you can make lots of money. It's lucrative. People like position for status. Like none of those things were important for me. I never had money growing up. I didn't really give a shit about money. I still don't, honestly. Status I care even less about. So like I'm like this corporate trajectory is not for me. That just validated it for me. In parallel, I was feeling this fire in my belly. I'm like, okay, like now feels like the right time for me to like take a risk, take a leap. You're 24, 25, you don't really have any real responsibility, or at least I didn't. I'm like, now seems like the right time to quit a perfectly good job for no real reason and take a shot at something. So I ended up leaving that company. And by the way, and you asked me about stock options. After I put in my notice, I got a call the next day from the CEO. He's like, come up to my office. So I got called up to the office, his office on the floor that, the rank and file aren't allowed on, got, pulled into his beautiful corner office overlooking the ocean, the whole shebang. He's like, oh, I understand you're leaving. I'm like, yeah, I feel like it's time. I'm going to try something different, and it's just the right time. He's like, well, is there anything we can do to compel you to stay? Like, of course, I don't want to tell him that like the vibe sucked, and I'm like, I'm not feeling it. And, like this is too corporate and stuffy. Again, what I didn't know is they were positioning for an exit to Western Union for gobs of money. So like, of course, that was what they had to do. But I'm like, my polite answer, I'm like, no, I just feel like the right time is right for me. Actually, Peter, you've inspired me watching you lead the business you founded. This has been very inspiring to me. It's like now is the right time for me to go out on my own and try something. He's like, well, of course, from one, founder to another, I respect that and have to support that. He's like, but, you know, could we increase your pay? Could we offer you some incentives by way of options or things like this? Is there anything we can do to compel you to stay? And I'm not going to say he was offering me a blank check. It's not quite like that, but he was certainly trying to put some new extrinsic motivators in front of me to compel me to stay. And I'm like, dude, like this doesn't really matter to me. So no, thank you. Like I appreciate it, but no, thank you. I'm out. I may call you for help one day or ask your advice, but like I think we just need to call time there on this chapter for me. And that was that. And I left to go start my first startup, which was in retrospect like ridiculously ambitious and was never going to work, but like I had to try it anyway, so I did.
All right, so let's get into that part now. So, I believe you already hinted at it, but it was your first real step into the gambling space outside of actually selling the tickets behind the counter, right?
So not quite. Before I took my first leap into this industry, and we will come to that, there was an interim. My first startup was actually outside of the gaming industry. So again, with the 4 year experience I had just had at this foreign exchange company and watching how they disintermediated the banks who offer foreign exchange products as well. They were able to come in and by specializing in this one thing, they were able to undercut the banks and sort of retail currency brokers, and it was very successful. I'm like, well, this is a very inspiring model. Gave me a bit of bit of like a concept of like, you know, I don't know, like competing on price and low margin, and this idea of like disintermediating the banks was like an idea that like really like got anchored into my psyche. And at the time, this is 2000, I don't know, 8 or 9. There was a couple platforms that had just launched. I was like a very like at that time too, very interested in startup culture. Back at the time, like the only thing that really like covered startups in general was TechCrunch and like the original version of TechCrunch. It was like every morning, like as a habit and a ritual, you would get up, pour a coffee, open up the TechCrunch website, and just start scrolling to see like the news stories of the day. Like that was what I consumed. So I was like very enamored with sort of startups in general. And I noticed at that time there was this new category of startup emerging, and there was a few startups that were doing it in this concept called person-to-person lending, P2P lending. And in the UK, there was this platform called, I think it was called Zopa. In the US, one had launched called Prosper.com, and there's a few others. And the whole premise of it was predicated on the fact that for people that need to borrow money or need access to short-term financing, like what are your options? Well, I can cash advance my credit card at like 22% or whatever that is. I can go to these like massively like predatory like short-term lending places, payday loan type places. I could go to the bank and ask for a loan, but that requires good credit. Not everybody has like credit worthiness or like the income to support getting a short-term loan. So like, what are your options? Your options can be fairly limited. On the other side, for people with, you know, disposable incomes and savings and basically sort of investment money that like looking for asset classes to put their money into, you know, what can you do? You can go to the bank and you can put your money into like a T-bill or here we call it GIC, like a low yield, fairly like low risk investment, pretty boring stuff. You could put it into the market and ride the market, you know, see how that goes. A few different things you can do on the investment side. Point being, there's a massive delta in that these P2P lending platforms discovered where, you know, people were paying for credit up to like 20%. The people that were investing were getting paid whatever 1 to 2% on their T-bills. In between that 2% to 20% is basically like the bank's margin on like lending and borrowing, right? There's a massive delta. That's why banks are banks, right? Like it's an insane business model. So the whole concept and premise of peer-to-peer lending was like to disintermediate that and say, you know what? Get out of here, banks. You're not welcome anymore. We don't need you anymore. What we're going to do is put together two groups of people in a marketplace like environment. On the one side, we have people that need access to capital for whatever their use case might be. Maybe these people can't qualify from traditional lending sources. On the other side, you have people with money looking to invest in different asset classes. What if these people with the money could lend directly to the people that need the money? This platform in the middle facilitates all of that, which includes risk profiling, KYC, you know, plugging into all of the banks, pay the whole shebang. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. They're doing it in the UK and in the US. Canada doesn't have anybody doing that. I'm going to build this thing for Canada. Um, so I tried to. I put together a team. We raised a bit of money. We built out pretty like shit hot like tech platform at the time. It was like this whole like social network meets like fintech and we like, you know, got on payment rails. We integrated with TransUnion to do like automated identity verification, like risk profiling, like all of this stuff. And what I later learned about a year into it is like, you know, started to, I'm like, got, I think 10 grand together from an investor. I'm like, I got to talk to a lawyer. I have no money to talk to a lawyer. No lawyer's going to talk to me. So I like 10 grand, went to the lawyer's office, ran him through it all. It's like really interesting. You guys have gotten a lot further than you probably should have, but I got to give you the news that here in Canada, the regulatory framework for this is not clear. You're probably going to end up either being classified as a security and or some sort of like pseudo banking option. In either case, it's going to be massively difficult to get this to market. You're going to need millions of dollars to pay lawyers like me to get you there. If you want to do it, I'm happy to help, but like that's where you're at. So that was kind of me being like, oh, you know, the banking model in Canada is very conservative for a reason, which is that in times of like economic hardship, Canada does a pretty good job of weathering the storms when there's sort of like macroeconomic crises, like the Great Financial Crisis or COVID or whatever's coming up next. That's because of our conservative banking model. But when it comes time to like innovate on and potentially disrupt aspects of the banking model, there's no room for innovation because we don't want to disrupt the thing that keeps us all safe. So anyway, had to call time on that, but it was like a wild project, gave me a ton of experience and just really like whet my appetite to like do it all again. So kind of shut that one down after a year. We built some pretty sophisticated tech and I'm like, you know what, I got to try and like salvage this IP somehow. So I put together a quick marketing website, found some like discussion boards and forums where people would talk about like different like aspects of like person to person lending. There was, you know, there was a pretty like rabid like sort of group of evangelists that were really into that type of model and that product. So I went on these message boards, posted a link to my website, basically marketing this tech platform for sale, and got a call from somebody in Australia. And he's like, I love the model. I'm looking here in Australia to broker, or sorry, to launch a version of this, except it's going to be person to person lending for mortgages specifically. So people can basically get a mortgage through P2P lending. He's like, I need tech to enable it all. He's like, I think what you've got here will work. So we went through a short DD period. I ended up selling the IP to this dude in Australia who I think went on to use it for mortgage brokering. I don't know whatever became of it, but long story short, I always sort of say that was like, you know, it was my first at bat, to borrow a baseball reference, my first at bat. definitely not a home run, but also wasn't exactly like a ground out to shortstop either. It was like a shallow fly ball to center field, and like ultimately it was too ambitious for my first at bat. But like as I said, just whet my appetite to like try something else, which led me to the betting industry. So anyway, that's a lot of me rambling, Travis, but that was it.
So, from you selling the IP to 2026, have you ever tried to use the vast progress the internet has made to see like this guy probably has like the number one peer-to-peer mortgage company in like the planet and like oh that's props to myself and you've never like tried to even scour the internet to see what he's up to?
I'm not bothered. Just hasn't really occurred to me. I'm just not that interested enough. I hope he's doing something with it. I hope he's made oodles of money, but no, I haven't even bothered to look, and don't think I'm gonna.
I feel like it's got to be on one side of the spectrum. It's either like he used it for bad, and he's currently in prison, or he used it for good, and he's currently got the biggest one. But an interesting first leap into entrepreneurialism, regardless. So now we sell the IP, and at the exact like selling date, did you already have your plan B in your back pocket, or is it something where you sold it and then you're like, okay, now I got to figure out what to do next?
So at that point, I knew I'm like, hey, sucks that this first at bat didn't work out, but like I'm coming right back up to the plate. Like there's gonna be something pretty quick here after. Like what's next for me? And that's when I started to hone in on betting as being like the problem space that I would do something in. I wasn't totally clear on what the solution was, but in terms of like the domain that I wanted to build in or work in, I was pretty clear like that was going to be the next stop for me. And what influenced that and what shaped that was a couple of things. One is that sort of throughout this timeline we're in right now, being like whatever 2008 to 2010 or whatever, a few things had happened, right? One is that the iPhone had come out finally, right? So all of a sudden there's apps everywhere. It's like sweeping the nation. It's this cultural craze and it's like such a novelty. There's new apps for all sorts of use cases, right? Like the iPhone was brand new and like people were, it was sort of like the gold rush at that time for the app ecosystem. That was one. The second thing is that the movie Moneyball had just come out, right? So all of a sudden this concept of sabermetrics and data analytics have been thrust into the mainstream consciousness on the back of this movie. And everybody's talking about like, can you moneyball this? Can you moneyball that? And I'm like, huh, like sort of overlaying a bunch of these different things. I'm like, from my sports betting, like the 10 years I had been doing it at that up to that point, I'm like, there really is like a lack of like basic like data analysis tools to help me make better betting decisions. And I know this is going to sound very familiar for you with what you're building with playerprops.ai, but like back then there was nothing, or I should say nothing, next to nothing. And I'm like, huh, like the data's out there. There's new form factors and like delivery mechanisms being like mobile apps to like, put things in front of people. People are interested all of a sudden like analyzing data. I'm like, maybe I can build something here. And that was sort of like the seedling for my first company, and ultimately like was kind of the founding thesis for what was called BetSmart Media. That was my company I co-founded in 2010. That was my official entry point into the industry, which I'm still in here 16 years later. Haven't meandered from it even for a minute. And yeah, I basically set out with my team of co-founders to build some basic data analytics tools to help make better betting decisions. And happy to like drill down on what that means, but like that was sort of like the founding thesis.
This was mainly a B2C product for the actual sports bettors, or did you already see the opportunity to feed other platforms that are doing sports betting?
Yeah, I mean, this was like the crux of our issue as a business was trying to figure out like what is the business model and commercial model. So like the founding thesis was very much predicated on it being a consumer product and a consumer use case. Fast forward a little bit, we raised some money, built a product, got to market, and realized what a lot of people I talk to now also realize, which is that acquiring a critical mass of users for a consumer product is very difficult and very expensive. And we had challenges doing that. And we're like, well, is there an opportunity to repackage and reposition some of this technology that we've built in more of a B2B context? So we did that. And I would say we had a lot more success commercializing it on the B2B side than we ever did B2C. We use our B2C products as sort of like showcase pieces to kind of like sell from a B2B perspective. But we realized a few things. One is that, and again, like this conversation is still very active here in 2026, but like, again, imagine like 2011, like there was nothing. If you were an operator back then, there was very little in terms of just like, engagement products that you could integrate within your core sportsbook offering to make it a more sticky user experience, to keep people coming back. I mean, sportsbooks inherently are transactional platforms, and drawing back on my days from like the foreign exchange business, like that's a transaction-based business, right? I see sports betting the same way as a transaction-based business ultimately, but you have a lot of sort of wrappers around that and sort of levels of engagement you can build on top of it to make it a bit more of a sticky experience. And that's what we thought our technology and our product represented. And that was the message we brought to operators around the world that would answer our calls. And, we had some success with it. We got a lot of resistance from some operators who saw the product as being like a threat to them in the sense that, like, ooh, like, this might make our customers too sharp. We don't want it. It was never, I'll call it what it is. Like, our product, it was a trends product. Like, and as you know, like, trends can be helpful. Are trends going to help you sort of, become a world-class sports bettor? Probably not. Like that's not exactly like the most effective betting strategy. But a lot of the sportsbook directors, the trading directors we talked to, looked at it and they're like, huh, like this is equipping and arming our customers with too much intel and insight. We don't want anything to do with it. Like we see what you're saying, we hear what you're saying, but it's not for us. So, I heard no an awful lot, but there were a couple of believers that really liked it. We did a deal. So we built it for the US sports. That was the data feeds we had at the time. And you want to talk about like data ecosystems back then, there was like next to nothing. Incidentally, we got our data feed from a company called Sports Insights. I'll shout out Dan Fabrizio here. Sports Insight had their own consumer product that we were basically building a competitor to, but I needed data to build that competitor. And the only place to get that data from was from Sports Insights themselves. So I called up Dan and said, "Hey, Dan, I'm Jesse from Canada. Nice to meet you. You have this XML feed here you're selling. Can I license it?" He's like, "Well, what are you doing with it?" I'm like, "Well, here's what we're doing." He's like, "Ah, it's a bit competitive." He's like, "I don't care." He's like, "You guys being out there also trying to like sell tools, it's like a rising tides lifts all boats situation." He's like, "We just need to like get more stuff out there and get more stuff in people's hands, and we can let the market decide which one's best for them. But like, there's nothing else out here right now." So yeah, he's like, "Take the feed, build whatever you want. Let me know how I can help you." So that's what we did. We built some tools with Sports Insights data, and we built it for the US sports, which is what Sports Insights had at the time. In somewhere in that timeline, the good people over at Opta in London, Opta being one of the part of Stats Perform now, but originally Opta was an independent business, which was basically the leader in football, soccer data feed provisioning. And somebody at Opta saw what we were building. They're like, "Are you guys doing this for soccer?" We're like, "No, we don't have any soccer data." They're like, "Well, that's kind of what we do. Like, can we form a partnership where you spin up a soccer instance of this product, powered by Opta data?" And we, with our commercial team, will go out there to all of the operators we sell our data to and see if they're interested in this product of yours, and we'll kind of be sort of an extension of your sales team. And so anyway, we did a deal with Opta. And I spent a lot of time over in the UK and Europe trying to sell to European operators. And long story short, we couldn't find product market fit. Like people liked it, they liked us, they really wanted to do it, but like they couldn't quite get over a lot of those initial objections and hurdles to get to the yes decision on the buy side. So it was frustrating for us, and there was a lot of like naivete and ignorance, and we just didn't know anything about the industry. So there was just like, kind of playing from that position of like not even really knowing the game you're playing, which was tough, and lessons learned for sure. But we gave it the old college try, and we made it pretty far. But we couldn't quite get to that critical mass that we ultimately thought we could. Even though I still maintained like if I was to get the band back together and spin that same product back up here in 2026, I think that product was still crushed. I think we were way ahead of our time. We were way too early, and we just didn't know it at the time, unfortunately.
At the peak, before you decided to close the doors on it, how many different operators or just partnerships in general do you think you had at one time?
Well, it's a little bit of a tricky answer in the sense that for that core product, I mean, a handful, I'll call it. What ended up happening, and here's like the real talk, is that we started our company. We raised, I think, $350,000 to build the first version of this product, right? So we did all the cliche things. I went and went and signed a lease on an office, went and overhired expensive engineers. I think our team was up to like 7 or 8 people, like very engineering heavy. At that time, like this product we built, I'm not going to say that like now it could be built over the weekend with Claude Code, although not far off. At that time, you needed a team of like 4 or 5 like pretty high-end engineers to like put this stuff together. So like it was tricky. And what happened is we burned through our angel funding before finding product market fit, certainly before revenue would cover the cost. We're like, well, now what? Sort of the cliche like existential crisis. No investors were lining up to extend our runway. So we're like, well, it's like, are we going to close up shop? We tried. Is that it? And through a bit of serendipity, this is like a funny story, but like through a bit of serendipity, I had reached out to this VC in Seattle, this random VC, and I'm like, hey, like, can I pitch you on what we're building? He's like, sure, send me the pitch. Sent him the pitch. He's like, okay, dude. He's like, I know nothing about sports betting, so I'm not the right VC for you. However, I have an introduction for you that might be helpful. Happy to make it. It's the CEO of William Hill Online, who I went to business school with way back in the day. I think William Hill's a betting company. Let me connect you with Henry. Maybe you guys can find something there. So I'm like, great, I'll take this intro to this Henry guy. Let's see what happens. Get the intro to Henry Birch. Henry's like, hey, like, great to meet you. I have two guys from my team, incidentally, who are flying next week from Gibraltar, where we're based for William Hill Online. They're flying over to San Francisco. They're in charge of innovation, which is a very broad remit. They're in charge of innovation. They're going to spend a week in San Francisco without any agenda other than like quote unquote like trying to find smart people to help us at William Hill. They had like no remit there other than just like trying to find smart people. I'm like, great, we're going down to San Francisco next week, boys. Like, got the co-founders in the car, drove to the airport, got the cheapest flight we could find, hopped down there, end up like connecting with these two random guys that got sent to San Francisco from William Hill Online in Gibraltar. Ended up out for a big evening with them, had a great time, like breaking bread with them and all that. Really hit it off, and they're like, "Hey guys, like, look, we have a large backlog of products and projects that we have no internal resource to like, prioritize. We all are also working on an internal project right now to build a suite of APIs with a bit of an eye towards having external developers be able to integrate with William Hill. And we see that as being a bit of a, catalyst for innovation for William Hill, but we need third-party developers to integrate with us. They're like, but we haven't stress tested these APIs yet. They're like, can you guys, you know, be this team? Like we like you, seemingly you can build good stuff. You understand the problem space you're building in. Are you guys willing to do a project with us? Maybe help us clear a project off of our backlog, integrate against our APIs, give us a bit of like stress testing on those APIs, and we'll pay you for it. And we're like, well, we're not really in like the work for hire business, but also we have no money and you're offering us money. So guess what? Yeah, we're in. And like literally the next week, the three of us were on a plane to Gibraltar and we spent a week in the offices of William Hill Online. And that was the catalyst for accidentally launching like I'll call it a services business. We were basically, I would say, at that time and for like a few years there, we were probably the most, if not one of the most, uh, sort of top level, like independent full stack product teams building in sports betting. And we did some great work for William Hill. We ended up, word got out a little bit. BWin called us up. They're like, hey, can you help us ship a new app we're trying to get to market? We're like, sure. Flew over to Austria, spent a few days in the BWin offices. All of a sudden, we ended up doing a lot of like work for hire for sports books and for operators and for a lot of the large suppliers. We ended up doing that for 4 years, which did a few things. One, that extended our runway. These were all like paid sort of work for hire type projects. It wasn't the model we wanted, but it like allowed us to like just survive long enough to keep chipping away and iterating on our core product ambitions. Number two, it gave us a ton of like insanely good experience just building with sportsbook APIs and just like sharpening our tools a little bit with what we were like capable of doing. Then thirdly, that allowed us to build up our names, our reputations. Again, we were like got to become known as like a pretty like likable, affable like group of guys from Canada. We were easy to work with. We were good at what we did. And word started getting around and operators and other like larger companies were calling us up, hey, can you help us with XYZ project? And for 4 years we did that. But we did kind of get fatigued with that. Again, it wasn't really what we set out to do. We didn't want to be sort of like hired guns for the rest of our lives. And one of the companies we did a bit of work for, I think in 2012, we did a project for Pinnacle Sports. Incidentally, because of Pinnacle's model being a low margin model, they were trying to like find ways on the marketing team there to be able to just help educate the market on what it means to be a low margin sports book and like how does that benefit you as a customer. And so of course they're like, hey, we need like some sort of dynamic calculator built to show people how much money they're saving over the long run betting with Pinnacle and our like minus 10 whatever minus 107 lines compared to minus 110. We're like, great, we'll build those calculators for you. Again, Claude could do that in 10 minutes now. Back then, you needed Smart Media and a team of 7 people to do it in 3 months. So got to know Pinnacle through that time. Long story short, 2015 rolled around. We were pretty fatigued. Circled back with Pinnacle. Ended up on a flight down to Curacao. My co-founder and I brought my girlfriend. He brought his brother. The four of us made a trip out of it. We took a couple meetings in the Pinnacle offices there. Went down there. with an idea about what we wanted to pitch them, came out of there with an offer to buy our company and pack our bags and move to the Caribbean. So that was sort of the start of the next big chapter. And that was that.
Did you have any inkling, idea, or thought whatsoever that when you were taking this flight down to Curacao, that that would potentially be the outcome that they would be buying? Like, did you kind of lead into this, like into conversations leading up to the actual trip? Like, oh, they might buy us, we might, work there full time. What was that pre and post flight experience like?
Let me tell you, Travis. So no, it was not on the radar at all. So just to set the scene a little bit here, we actually went down there on that flight. We went down there to pitch them on an idea we had. It was, we didn't tell them this part. And if you ask Paris now, she'd be like, "What are you talking about?" But if you ask my co-founder, he'd be like, "Yeah, of course, is how it went." Um, we were trying to throw a Hail Mary. We had a big idea. Again, as I said, we were fatigued after kind of just doing like the work for hire thing for 4 years, and we kind of wanted to like rally around and get galvanized around like one big idea and just like go all in on that. But that required capital, and that required a strategic partner, of which there was a very short list of strategic partners in the world that would be a fit to make this idea come to life. And one of the only partners that it could be was Pinnacle because of the uniqueness of the Pinnacle model. Our idea was predicated on that. So I'm like, great, we're going to go down to this island in Curacao, which I had to Google to figure out where Curacao was. I'm like, oh, it looks great. We'll go down there. We're going to pitch Pinnacle on this big idea. We're going to ask them for a strategic investment, and we're going to go and do this thing. So that was like the thought on the flight down to Curacao. We get down there, we get to pitch our idea. Meeting goes okay, I guess. They're like, okay, like, thank you, like, interesting. Of course, there's a room full of people like I'd never met before. So we're like, I don't know who these people are. Like, we'll go through the presentation. I think Paris just told them like, hey, we got a couple of Canadians coming down, like go like spend an hour with them, just kind of hear what they're up to. So there's like nobody had context, right? So we're in this room, we pitch, finish up that meeting, say goodbye. My co-founder and I like leave the office and like go back to our hotel down the road. We're like, I have no idea what just happened. Like I don't know who these people were. Don't know what we even like. Anyway, next day, I get a call back while we're down there from Paris. She says, "Hey, come back into the office tomorrow. I debrief with the team. Want to kind of talk about like next steps here." So like, okay, like go back. We go to her office and she's like, "Well, look, they ran me through the idea. The idea is actually pretty interesting. You guys, if anybody was able to make it work, we believe it would be you guys. It's an ambitious idea, but like we think you guys have what it takes to make it work. Unfortunately, we're not going to be making the strategic investment at this time. So, you need to divorce yourself of that idea and that dream." It's like, but while I have you here, uh, we see your body of work. We've gotten to know you over the last few years with the project we did together and just, through showing up at the conferences a few times a year and seeing each other there. And she's like, look, Pinnacle just went through an ownership change about a year ago. The new owner is, very, I guess, just to contextualize it, the original ownership group of Pinnacle, they were older guys, a bit old school in their methodology. They weren't necessarily leaning into tech, let's say. Whereas when the new owner came in, he wanted to lean into technology and really modernize a lot of the approach that Pinnacle was taking. And I think now, in retrospect, like we were viewed as this team that could help them with their mission to sort of modernize a lot of the way they were approaching their product and sort of the marketing of the product. So she's like, look, would love to find a way to have you spend the next couple of years with Pinnacle and working exclusively with Pinnacle. Obviously, you're running a business. We've got to figure out what that looks like. So we, kind of had a conversation on the fly about like what would this look like. We shook hands on like a provisional deal, and my co-founder and I walked out of the office back to our hotel and said to my girlfriend, she's like, "Oh, like how was the meeting? Did you get the investment?" I'm like, "No, but also I think we just got offered like the opportunity to exit and take jobs with Pinnacle and move to Curacao. Like, now what?" So yeah, it was definitely like expectation versus reality in that conversation were two very different things, but ultimately worked out pretty well.
What year was that when you got that opportunity?
So we were down there in 2015, shook hands down there in 2015. Took a few months. Took a number of months for us to like wind down our company. One thing nobody ever talks about when they talk about startups, and like startups are always talked about in such like a romantic context, and nobody ever talks about like the unsexy sides of it. One very unsexy side is like what happens when you wind down a company. I learned about that in real time at that point. Took a few months to wind things down elegantly. Also took a number of months as part of the deal, we were going to move to Curacao, so had to get all of our, residency permits, work permits, and all that. That took several months, and the pace at which the bureaucracy moves on a small Caribbean island, leaves some things to be desired, let's say. So it took a while for the paperwork to come through. So we did the deal mid 2015 in short, and I think flew out of Canada on like January 3rd, 2016. So like 6 months later, we were actually able to hop on a plane and make the one-way trip down there.
And then, so I think at this point I know more than 0% of kind of your background and the handful of conversations we've had over the, I don't know, 4-ish years now we've known each other. So 2016, you're now living in Curacao. The question, so you said you flew down with your girlfriend, and then your business partner flew down with his brother. I'm assuming that relationship stayed intact when he told the girlfriend that I'm going to now be living in Curacao. Are you coming with me, or is that the end of that relationship?
So we had just started dating, well, like at less than a year before being on that trip. And of course, as a lot of relationships go in the first year, things are great, right? Sort of like the honeymoon phase. And so it's like all of a sudden, like she's down there thinking she's just joining me on this like trip to a sunny destination for a week. And all of a sudden, like I blindside her with this like, hey, like, by the way, I might have to move down here. And meanwhile, she's got her own life going on outside of me and like things going on. Like, and we haven't been dating that long. It wasn't just an automatic, like, hey, I'm gonna move here with you. Like, no, she's like, I mean, obviously, like, right away, we both like kind of get quite emotional. It's like, well, like, what does this mean? Type vibe. And her first response was like, you need to do this. You are not going to not go because of me. You've been like working towards and building towards this for way too long to not take this opportunity. Like, you need to do it. And I'm not going to, like, you have to do it. And I'm not going to take no for an answer, essentially. And what that means for us, like, I don't know right now, but we'll figure that part out later. So like right away in that moment, I'm like, okay, like I got to figure out how to like make this relationship work while doing this thing I need to go do. And we tried the long distance thing. She stayed in Canada. I stayed on in Curacao. She would come down and visit every few months. I'd come home to Canada every few months. Shortly after I started my time at Pinnacle, I got given a broader remit than I first signed up for. I was given responsibility for a lot of teams that were based in London. So I was over in central London a lot. So I was bouncing between Canada, Curacao, and London like every few weeks on a new flight. I literally had a suitcase in each of the three locations. I had like no fixed address for like 5 years. And we tried to make the long distance thing work. And I'm pleased to report, I don't feel like people are like on the edge of their seat. Did it work or didn't it work? We're married now. We made it work. Long distance was tough. But it was a cool way to, I guess, like incubate a relationship. And every time we saw each other after, 6 or 8 weeks, of course, it was like meeting again for the first time. When I eventually moved back to Canada and took that last one-way trip back and, we got a place together and moved in, we're like, oh, now we're just like, regular people in a relationship. The honeymoon part was over, but like, it's the start of the next new important chapter. So yeah, look, we weren't sure if it was going to work, but like in that moment when she's like, you have to do this, I'm like, okay, well, then like, I got to like, I'm committing to like trying to make this work as well. And yeah, luckily we got through it, and like life's been great ever since, man. So yeah, it's a success story.
Yeah, because I wasn't 100% sure. That's for the reason of asking that question, if that was the actual one you wound up marrying. So, I mean, now everything makes sense. And I feel like her initial response, and I believe you said this was her response when you were still in Curacao on that initial trip, that she was saying you have to go for this. And I feel like getting that feedback from somebody you just recently started dating, I feel like is a huge, like, green flag, I guess you can call it. Like, oh, hey, this person actually understands things and is not just, you know, making a crazy emotional decision or anything like that. So I would have definitely wanted to try as well with somebody with that mindset. So how long? I know you said you were kind of all over the place. I mean, Curacao, London, trips back to Canada. How long did the this particular role with Pinnacle based in Curacao last for?
So that first trip down there, when we shook hands with Paris on the deal, we shook hands on a deal for us to stay with Pinnacle for 2 years. She's like, I'm not going to ask you for more than 2 years right now. If you can commit 2 years, you're going to get great experience. We're going to, whatever. Like, she's like, it's going to position you for whatever is next, but like, give me at least 2 years. I'm like, I can commit to that. Let's do it. I was with Pinnacle for 6 years, right? So that says a lot about the company, about Paris as a leader, being able to work for somebody, if you get the option to bail somewhere after 2 years, if you're not feeling the vibe and everybody's, like it's kind of what we signed up for. So like, it's an easy exit hatch to take, like great, but like, real testimony to her and her leadership and the opportunity she gave me and my team being part of something much bigger and frankly giving us the opportunity for our work to have a much greater and far-reaching impact than it ever did, kind of doing things on our own from the corner of Canada that we live here. So, like forever grateful to her for giving me the opportunity, as well as for really helping to develop me as well, even further to give me a ton of responsibility for a lot of people across a number of functional teams. Further developing my own like leadership ability, obviously from the business side, being on her executive leadership team and sort of having responsibility to help lead the business. That gave me a ton of like experience I wouldn't trade the world for. So yeah, I ended up being there for 6 years. That 6 years though, like I was on Curacao full time properly for probably like the first three of those. When I got given remit for the London office as well, I kept like an address in Curacao, but like I wouldn't say I was like living there. Certainly, I was like for tax purposes a resident of Curacao. Like all my, I was a Curacao resident, but like wasn't actually there that much of the time. I was probably there like a third of the time, sort of half the time in London and the rest kind of Canada and wherever else I got sent. So living in Curacao was amazing. Now that I'm not there anymore, I'm like, man, I really wish I was living in Curacao again. Of course, grass is always greener on the other side. When I was there, I enjoyed it, but of course, like I was very work focused. I had this long distance relationship. I really like wasn't there for like the life experience aspect of it. A lot of my friends who were single were, and of course, like leaning into to that aspect of it. I was pretty focused during my time there, and as far as things to do on a tiny Caribbean island that you can drive from one side to the other in like 45 minutes, like as I always say, like you can only drink beer on the beach with your friends so many times before you crave a little bit of variety outside of work. And for me anyway, the water sports, like all that fun stuff in the Caribbean Sea, but I craved a bit more variety. So like I knew it was going to be a long-term home for me. But certainly for the few years I was there, like loved my time there. I miss it dearly. Like think of it very fondly. Can't wait to get back. A little tougher to get down there now with a toddler at home, but it's an amazing place, and it gave me so much opportunity, and just like think of it like in the most fondest of terms.
So 6 years of this opportunity kind of brings us to the early, even the first post-COVID year, about 2020, 2021. I'm curious if that event of COVID is played any part to you deciding to step away at the 6 year mark.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes, definitely. A couple things happened in parallel that I think ultimately led to me kind of concluding that my time with Pinnacle was probably coming to a close. COVID was definitely a catalyst for it. All of a sudden, we're all of us are just at home all of the time, and it leaves a lot of idle time for the mind to wander as being, I guess, one sort of piece of the puzzle there. Number two, being back, and you mentioned earlier, I'm on Pacific time zone. Other than Hawaii, Pacific time zone's like the last time zone to wake up in the business day, which is to say, when I come online in the morning, everything's waiting for me, right? Everybody's already been up. The UK has been up for 8 hours, getting to the end of their day. Eastern time zone's at lunchtime. Stuff was waiting for me, so I would be up. I would have to get up super early. I'm not a morning person, or better now. I wasn't certainly wasn't then. And for Pinnacle, and again, like as an executive, like I had to kind of like be available 24/7. So I was up on calls at like 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m., like often, like more often than not. And I'm like, I'm not vibing on this. I'm not a morning person. I'm also not like doing that good of a job. I'm not that effective. I'm like, heart's not in it. Kind of over the 6 year arc of my time there, what I think we were brought in for and what we were able to accomplish, we were able to do that. And during the latter part of my time there, like the companies was sort of shifting into a bit more of like a professionally managed operation, I will say. And again, not comparing it to my earlier experience in the foreign exchange company where like they were going through due diligence and things got very corporate. Pinnacle's definitely wasn't and hasn't been and probably still isn't a very corporate, operation as they go. But things were definitely shifting there. And I'm like, you know what? Like I feel like the end of my useful life is here in this company, and what it can get from me is definitely coming to a close. One thing Paris and I did ideate on though is like, we talked. I was pretty, we've always had a very like open and transparent relationship and partnership. And she's like, Jesse, I can tell like your heart's not really in it in the same way that it was. I'm like, no, you're right. It's not. Like astute observation as always. It's not. COVID is a factor here. Me being stuck at home on calls at 5:30 is definitely a factor. But also like, you know, I have like 100 people under my responsibility now. More days than not, most of my time is spent on like HR issues. I'm technically responsible for product. We're not shipping anything right now. Things are log jammed on the development side. Like it's just not filling my cup in the same way that it once was. She's like, well, like what does fill your cup? I'm like, well, there's a lot of these, startups. I'm out at the conferences, with my Pinnacle hoodie on, and I'm kind of like the gatekeeper for Pinnacle. Any supplier or vendor over those like 5 or 6 years that wanted to pitch Pinnacle on something, like I was kind of the person they had to convince it was a good idea, and then I would champion it internally. Um, and I'm like, I'm seeing a lot of like cool stuff out there right now. I kind of want to just like see what's out there. She's like, well, maybe there's a way we can do that within Pinnacle. I'm like, well, like, what does that look like? I'm like, how about, she's like, how about this? Let's like think about a terminus point and a terminus date for your current role, and we'll sort of architect that and manage that transition. You also have a ton of accrued unused vacation. She's like, take some time off. I'm like, that's a great idea. I probably should take some time off. I'm gonna take a sabbatical, I call that. I had like 2 months of vacation accrued. I'm like, I'm taking July and August. I'm taking the summer off, like back when I was in high school. Summer off, baby, let's go. And then when I come back in September, I'm going to come in and step into this new role. And kind of the concept we had architected was this one where I could be almost like, I don't call it chief innovation officer, but like directionally, that was the concept we had ideated on. We're like, can me, Jesse, be out there finding ways to bring innovation into Pinnacle, tapping into startups and, people with ideas and find a way for them to find kind of like a framework for collaboration. That was the concept. In retrospect, this is very obvious, but what ended up happening, I took that 2 months off, took that July and August off, reported for duty, like logged into Slack for the first time on like the day after Labor Day in September. And I'm like, I should not be back here. I think that sabbatical actually might have been it. So like, kind of faked my way through the first like 3 days of that week, got to Friday. Paris checks in. She's like, how's it going being back? I'm like, we should probably have a chat. She's like, yeah. So we had the chat, and I'm like, you know what? Like, I actually think this is like the right time to kind of step away from it all. I've been away for 2 months. The org's already moved on around me without me there. Like, why push this boulder uphill? So yeah, we had like a very amicable sort of parting at that point. And frankly, I needed to catch my breath. At that point, I was like planning my wedding. So I'm like, I need to take some time off. I need a creative project though. Like this, as I said, this role for me has been like very HR heavy, which isn't like my passion, my area of passion, let's say. I need to create a project for myself. Like, what's the Venn diagram of things I can like overlay to figure out like what I should spend my time on as a creative project? One, I've always been very into like the 0 to 1 phase of company building. How do you take an idea and get to product market fit? Two, obviously, I've always been pretty into like the product side of sports betting and real money gaming. So like that's an area I want to keep plugged into. And number three, I'm like podcasting. I don't know anything about podcasting. I listen to a lot of them, but like I want to challenge myself to do something I've never done before and put myself in a position of massive discomfort, have to do all the cringe things like listen to yourself talking on a recording and edit it. Like, it gives you the ick. I'm like, yeah, great. That makes me uncomfortable. Let's do it. That's what I want. So that was the Venn diagram. I'm like, I'm going to launch a podcast to talk to startups of companies in real money gaming. Like that was the origins of it. It was a creative project. I wanted to challenge myself to get to 50 episodes, mostly because I did not believe I could do it and stay consistent. Coming back to my comment before about like compounding effects, I'm like, I'll see if I can get to 50 and like see what happens after 50. Maybe there's some sort of like compounding available there. Got to 50 episodes and I'm like, well, now what? Had managed to reposition myself organically after 50 episodes from being like Jesse from Pinnacle to Jesse, like the startup guy, all of a sudden. I'm like, well, I might as well keep going with this and see where it leads. And that was like 4.5 years ago now. And like to really like fast forward to the here and now, podcast is still going. I definitely have like a media business on my hands now. We also have multiple verticals that we're launching, that we have launched and are launching sort of around the core media pillar. And yeah, I definitely have a business on my hands. It wasn't by design. There wasn't a lot of intentionality to it, which I guess is a bit of a recurring theme through me now kind of going through my history here. But the compounding effect of just showing up every week and doing this week in and week out has put me in a position where, I've got that credibility. I have a lot of trust that I've built up, with the founder community. I try to help out where I can, with everybody. And I hope you know that a little bit, Travis. Just trying to like give value, and the hope and dream is that it comes back in some capacity. But core point being that I've really just been focused on like building one brick at a time and having a little bit of blind faith that this will lead somewhere interesting. And I would say over the last like 6 to 12 months, it's starting to get very interesting. So like we'll see where it all leads, but there's still no like grand plan with all of it. I'm still very much building organically, albeit with a bit more of a crystallized sense about what it is I'm building and probably what we're working towards here. But yeah, so kind of going with the flow, doing it sort of one day at a time here.
Now, how many episodes are you deep on your podcast?
205, I think we dropped this week, something like that.
Nice. And I mean, yeah, we've essentially caught ourselves up here to 2026, and yeah, that was yeah, man, I love doing podcasts. I don't know if like you when you record like when you're done, because I know that you look into like the person, the company a little bit, of course, before you hit record for your style of podcast. But I don't know if you just like love a story so much that when you're done hitting the record button, you're like, man, that was like not just a great podcast in terms of like it was a great back and forth, but like the story or the person themselves. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. And if there's anybody out there that's listening that wants to reach out to you to pick your brain about something, anything that you covered that you have experience in, or if there's a startup, betting startups out there that maybe interested in being on your podcast, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
The call to action. Yeah, good question. Best way to reach out to me. Right now, my LinkedIn DMs are a disaster. So apologies to everybody that's waiting in there right now. So I would not encourage people to pile on there because I've declared bankruptcy there. I don't love dropping my email in public places, but that probably is the best way to do it. First name at bettingstartups.com. Find me there. But look, if you find your way to messaging me in any platform, I will get back to you, albeit some quicker than others.
I think the email's the perk for them getting through the the hour and 20 minutes. So congrats.
Is that how long we've been talking for? I usually just ask the questions, right? It's not often people ask me to talk, so I'm not
Yeah,
just
yeah.
rambling away here.
Well, no, but
It's been an
this
hour
is the
20?
entire
Okay.
purpose. That's why when you asked before you hit the record button, this is the entire purpose of getting the entire story, whether it's short story or a long story. And no, like every detail you put in was definitely warranted, and I thank you for going into the detail that you did go into. So yeah, so I thank you again for hopping on here. For those people who enjoyed this episode, you already know how to reach out to them, as you just mentioned. If you want to see more episodes, we have a lot that came before. We'll have a lot that comes after. Just subscribe to this channel or subscribe to whatever you're seeing or listening to this on. Jesse, thanks again for hopping on here, and best of luck to everything you have going on in the future.
Thank you. By the way, as a final note for me, I understand this is episode 40, which makes this
Yeah.
podcast over the hill now. So congrats to you on getting to episode 40. I have empathy for what it takes to get to that point, and sometimes what feels like a bit of a why am I doing this type sort of mindset at the early stage. But good for you, man, for keeping it going. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate it. And then, over the hill, you brought that up, and 40 is the age that I'm turning this year. So yeah,
Okay.
over the hill in multiple ways. But yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.